Hey Nicole, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good, good. I almost said good morning, but it's not morning where I am or where you are, so that's kind of funny that I almost said that.
Yeah, I'm really bad about that. I just happen to say good morning. Good morning rolls
It
off the
just
tongue a little
feels
easier
right.
than good
Yeah.
afternoon.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, even when I go to like type an email, that's my go-to, like good morning. Oh wait, it's not morning.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Anyway, sorry, I digress. Well, I'm excited to have you on. We have so many things that we're going to talk about in a short period of time, so we'll see what we can get through. But before we do that, can you introduce yourself to the listeners?
Sure. My name is Nicole Barlow. I am a mom of six kiddos, five that were adopted through foster care. And we got into foster care oh, 12 years ago or so. So we've been in this a while. I'm a parent trainer, so I train foster parents for a living. I'm a TBRI practitioner and I am a health and wellness coach that really focuses on serving foster and adoptive parents and trauma professionals.
That's cool. Yeah, and we're gonna get into that because gosh, it's so important. Actually, I just was meeting with one of my clients right before this, and that's what we talked about was self-care and
Yeah.
how you keep putting yourself on the back burner. You
Yeah.
gotta you gotta take care of yourself. We made a plan, and anyway, so yeah, it's really important. So,
Yeah.
so before we jump into some of that stuff, though, I would love to hear about how you got into foster care and ultimately adoption. Like, was that your end goal? How, like, all of that?
Yeah, no, honestly, we thought maybe we would adopt, but we kind of
Mm-hmm.
separated the two. Like we always thought we would adopt internationally or do like a private
Mm-hmm.
infant adoption. We didn't really see foster care and adoption tied together.
Okay.
So I volunteered at an after school Bible club and I had a foster kid that joined my group and I just fell in love with him.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's very different. Foster care is very different when it has a face and a name and you can like see it in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
And what I knew of his story was super, super hard. And so I went home and I told my husband, hey, I think we should get into foster care. And he was like, no.
Right.
I was like, okay, well,
Yeah.
and just because nobody around us was doing it, so he
Yeah.
had
So
never
you just didn't
really,
know.
yeah, he didn't know what to
Yeah.
expect. He was like, why would we? I don't understand. Like, why
Yeah.
would we do that? That doesn't sound like something, you know. But you know, the Lord kind of worked in his heart and kind of shifted his heart a little bit along the way. And so he agreed to go to an informational meeting and then agreed to he's much more cautious about stuff,
Mm-hmm. Which is
but
good.
it's great because it
Yeah.
slows me down a little bit. And
Yeah.
once he gets into it, he's very steady because he's
Mm-hmm.
already kind of processed through all the questions.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I am much more likely to jump in feet first, but then once I get into it,
Mm.
I panic,
Yeah. Like, oh crap, what did I just get into? Yeah.
which is exactly what happened. I mean, we got placed with kids in the first weeks. I called our agency and I was like, "Hey, you're gonna have to come get these two kids. Like, two's too many.
Oh,
We shouldn't have done this."
yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, my agency, I guess they are used to people doing that. They were so
Yeah,
kind and they are
probably.
like, "Listen, you're okay. What resources can we give you, right? So we can help
Yeah.
you through this time." Um,
Yeah.
but my husband never wavered because he had kind of processed through all of that information all along the
Hmm.
way.
So that's how you got into it.
Yep.
Then how did you end up with a sibling group of five?
Yeah, so we had fostered for a while. Our first placement was a sibling group of two, and
Okay.
we had them for 2.5 years, and then
Oh.
they ended up being reunified with their
Oh.
family.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah, great. I mean, we still are connected to them and their
Oh,
family, and they come and stay with us. They were 3 months and 4 when we got them. Now they are 11 and 16.
oh my gosh.
I know. I love
Crazy.
it though.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's just been such a gift to see them grow up and to
Hmm.
grow up with their biological family.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
That's
so
cool.
we had done some respite after they left, because 2.5 years is a long time. So
Hmm.
we had
Yeah.
to really process through some grief.
Especially as your first placement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we had to process through some stuff right after they left. So we did some respite. We took another shorter term placement. And then we got the call. We had done respite for a couple of our younger kids. And so when their foster home was not an adoptive resource and their
Yeah.
parents' rights were terminated, because we had some connection with a couple
Okay.
of the kids, they called us to ask us if we would be willing to be an adoptive resource for them. And
Gosh.
so I
What was that
asked my
like? What was
do
that
what?
like? Getting a phone call saying, would you be an adoptive resource for 5 children?
Yeah, I mean, I think we were all a little shocked. And at the
Yeah.
time, we were actually living in a rental house. I mean, we had had all this movement of events. We lived in a house and we were like, okay, if we're going to foster long term,
Yeah.
we'd like a house with a better setup.
Sure.
And so we sold our house. We put a contract on another house. And in the process, my husband lost his job.
Oh.
And so we were like, okay,
Oh.
Lord, what are you doing here?
Yeah. What is
Right?
happening? Yeah.
And we didn't really know what was going on. So we ended up in a rental house, and we were in the rental when we got the call for the five. And it was not a place where we could have taken everybody.
Wow.
Um, and a couple of our kids needed their own rooms, and so
Hmm.
it
Hmm.
just wasn't the house that we were in was not a good setup. Um, so we were like, okay, well, God, if you want this to happen, right, you've
Make it happen.
help us find a
Yeah.
place like
Yeah.
soon. And my husband had gotten a job by this point and
Hmm.
all the things, but we ended up finding a house that we had driven past a million times. It was in the same neighborhood right down the street from the house we had originally had a contract on.
Hmm.
And it was 7 bedrooms.
Wow.
And it wasn't that big of a house. It
Yeah.
was just the way that it was set up
Yeah.
was exactly what we needed.
Hmm.
And so we were like, okay, I guess this solidifies that we're supposed to be taking this placement. And so we
Yeah.
agreed to the placement and moved into the house about 2 weeks before the kids moved in.
Oh my gosh. Quick, get everything unpacked.
I know. Like, I mean, it really was a whirlwind. Like, I
Hmm.
don't even remember half of that season. I just
I
remember
bet.
sitting in the living room once we had gotten moved in, before the kids had moved in,
Yeah.
and just like breathing, like, wow, what a gift this
Uh-huh.
all is, this whole life, right? That we
Yeah.
get to serve kids in this way, that we get to see blessings in certain ways that, I don't know that other people see.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, but then the kids moved in, and that quietness and that stillness in this new house
Yeah.
it went away quickly.
Yeah. Gone. It's
Gone.
gone.
There was no quiet.
So, how long did they live with you and before adoption happened?
Almost a year.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
in our state, they have to live with you for 6 months before
Yeah.
the adoption can be finalized. But our kids had a lot of trauma, both before they came into foster care and within
Yeah.
foster care itself.
Because that happens.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so, it was a bit harder than we
Hmm.
had anticipated.
Yeah.
I think I was a bit prideful going into it because I was already training foster parents. I knew all of the things to do. I was very
Hmm.
trauma informed, but actually putting them into
Hmm.
practice, and
It's so different.
it's very different.
Hmm. Were you
As
already a TBRI practitioner?
I was not,
Oh,
but
okay. Okay.
I mean, we had connections with lots of TBRI folks. I
Okay.
had read The
So you knew
Connected
that stuff.
Child.
Yep.
Yes, I was TBRI informed.
Sure. Yep.
Like I had awareness of it. And when we did get our kids, like one of the first things that we did was get TBRI therapist for them. I had a
Oh,
TBRI
good.
parent coach that was kind of walking me through some things. So we had a lot of that TBRI
Hmm.
wisdom
Yeah.
coming
Yeah.
at us.
Well, and so at what point were you like, so was that stuff that you put into place from the beginning, or was that like you realized
Kind
one
of.
day we don't know what we're doing?
Well, I mean, I don't really remember the first couple of weeks.
Yeah.
We were really just trying to keep everybody alive.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I always say it was like preschool fight club at my house.
Yeah.
Like, oh, they hadn't always been placed together either, and so
Yeah.
there were some sibling dynamics that
Mm-hmm.
were kind of playing out. There were just a lot of things that
Mm-hmm.
we had to kind of work on.
Mm-hmm.
And my parent coach was really wise in saying, "Hey, we're not going to look at this, this, and this during the season. We're
Mm-hmm.
just looking at safety.
Yeah.
Like that's all we're focused on is safety for this season."
Mm-hmm.
And so we went through a long season where it was just like trying to survive. I don't know how much, I mean, we were being fed TBRI practices and we were had TBRI therapists that were giving us stuff, but I don't know how much we were actually implementing
Mm-hmm.
because I don't really remember
Yeah.
what was going on. I know that we had certain things in place like I did one-on-one connection time with my kids every single day.
I love that. Yeah.
And there were some things during meltdowns that our parent coach had like worked us through. We had a child that would rage for like 5 to 6 hours a
Oh,
day.
wow.
And
Poor
so
baby.
do what?
Poor baby.
I
Yeah.
know. It was hard.
Mm-hmm.
It was hard to watch her go through that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it was also good for connection.
Yeah.
Because I sat in there with her
Mm-hmm. You were
for five
present.
or 6 hours
Mm-hmm.
every single day. Do you know what I'm saying? And so
Yeah.
we built a relationship, we built a connection during that time. Um, with more one-on-one time, I think, than I gave some of my other kids
Yeah.
because she needed that
She
during
needed
that
it.
season, but
Mm-hmm.
it built a really good relationship between us as well.
Mm-hmm. So you were doing parent training or foster parent training.
Yep.
Foster parent training. Yeah.
Yep.
Um, but that was not TBRI.
No, I do the pre-service training for foster
Okay.
parents.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
And so I was doing that already.
Got it. At what
But
point did you become a practitioner then?
not until last year.
Oh, okay.
Um, but my husband and I became Empowered to Connect parent
Got
trainers
it. Yeah.
back in 2018, 2019.
Sure.
So a couple of years after we had gotten our kids and things were really hard, we were like, no, we need to dig in even
Okay.
more. Like it's not enough just to have professionals once a week telling us how to do things like
We need more.
we need more. We need to really dig in here. And so
And yeah,
we
and
became
so
parent
go ahead.
trainers.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that was kind of what your more was
Yeah.
becoming parent trainers through Empowered to Connect.
Yep.
Got it. Okay. And so then what did that look like once you went through that training? Was it like, you felt that shift or did it like how did that play out in the home?
Yeah. With some of our kids, we felt that shift.
Hmm.
We have one that is um has more diagnoses, has more mental health type
Hmm.
things that it did not we saw some where we were making some headway, but it did not play out like we were hoping that it
Sure.
would fully play out.
Yeah.
But part of that was good too, in that I had to release some control. I had to
Yeah.
release like that I'm not the healer. I'm not
Hmm.
the savior. I'm not this person that's going to be able to do A, B, and C and it all just be fixed,
Fine. Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
So I had to process through some of that in myself, but it was helpful to dig a little bit deeper. And I think as we train other people,
Yeah.
as we teach other people, we become better at it
Oh,
ourselves,
100%. Yeah.
and it holds us accountable
Yeah.
for doing those things on a regular basis.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, so what are some TBRI strategies that you felt were the most helpful, maybe initially, like after you did the Empowered to Connect, and maybe even after TBRI practitioner training,
Yep.
um, from a parent perspective? Like, what are some things that you're like, everybody needs to do this?
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of it is about regulating ourselves and taking those same tools, those same TBRI tools about connecting with other people,
Mhm.
about co-regulating with other people, about really empowering with food and water and
Mhm.
movement. Things that are really big TBRI tools for our kids, but taking those elements and applying them to ourselves.
Yeah.
Because just like our kids heal relationally, just like our kids need, people to walk alongside of them, we do too.
Hmm.
And that's not going to come from our kids. So
Yeah.
we need to have those relational needs met from somewhere else. We need people to come alongside of us and be pouring into us and to be able to sit with us and process with us, um,
Yeah.
so that we can get some co-regulation, because sometimes we need
Hmm.
co-regulation and people to step into our stories and kind of relate to us in those ways.
Yeah. I feel like that's one of the hard things, though, because it can feel so isolating parenting kids who have come from adversity and hard stuff because other people don't understand. And so they look from the outside and are probably not intentionally judgy, but judgy. And
Yeah.
like, oh, you're kidding me? You're going to reward your kid for taking a shower? You're going to, like stuff
Yes.
that doesn't make sense to them. So then we pull in and then we feel more isolated because we don't have those people to feed into us. Where do we find those people?
Yeah, I think it's other foster and adoptive parents,
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
people that are going through it. There really is no way for people to understand unless they're in it,
Yeah.
unless they see it for themselves, unless it's been in their homes, they're
Mhm.
not going to understand. I think sometimes even professionals don't really
Mhm.
understand the weight
Unless they're living it. Yeah.
unless they're living it, right? Because it's different to see it in an office
Hmm.
and to go home to your safe space
Yeah.
versus your whole world being this, right?
Yeah.
And so I think having people who understand, but also people maybe that aren't currently in the thick of it.
Yeah.
Um, because when you surround yourself with people that are also in the thick of it, it can become like a complaining session. Like
Totally. Which
somebody
is
else
not
isn't able
helpful.
to support you if
Yeah.
they're in the thick of it too, right?
Yeah.
And so you really have to find people who maybe are a step beyond where you are, or
Hmm.
even people that are not exactly where you are, but that have some understanding of what foster care and adoption looks like in
For
the home.
sure. Yeah. Yeah. That's good. I mean, so I actually wrote down this quote that you put in the questionnaire that I sent you for the onboarding. And you said basically what you were talking about is um, parents who are really wanting to implement whether it's TBRI strategies or some sort of trauma informed strategies, but they can't. And you say because they're neglecting their physical health, they're unable to implement strategies that they believe in.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Period. Exclamation
Yeah.
point. Right.
Yes.
So
Yes.
talk to me more about that.
Yeah, it's funny. Even just yesterday, I was in a group, social media group, and there were a bunch of professionals, therapists and stuff, and somebody was saying something about, a parent that they were trying to teach them, different trauma-informed strategies or, help their kids cope, but the parent wasn't implementing anything.
Hmm. Hmm.
And as a professional, they couldn't understand why. Like, I'm giving
Mm.
them all of these strategies. Why aren't they doing it.
Hmm.
And I think what we forget is that our minds work very much the same way as our kids do. And so if our
Yes.
bodies are in survival mode, we can't connect.
Yep.
If our bodies are in survival mode, we're not going to be able to be patient and regulated, right? Like we're not going to be able to use our logical brain to
Yeah.
be able to respond in the way that we want to. And our bodies can go into that dysregulation, into that survival mode just as quickly as our kids can.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, and how many of us that are parenting kids who have high needs or have come from hard have compassion fatigue and secondary
Yes.
trauma
Yes.
and and that's very real too. So which is even more important for us to be really caring for ourselves because we can't give our kids what we don't have,
Yes.
right?
Well, and a lot of times those things come because we've put ourselves on the back burner already, right?
Yeah.
Like we've already been neglecting our self-care. We've already been neglecting our health.
Yeah.
Um, we do practices that we would never advise for our kids. Like it is a recipe for a meltdown. Like for example, as a mom, how easy is it for us to go until 4 p.m. in the
Before.
evening
Yep.
and we haven't eaten anything? We
Yep.
haven't drank any water, right? Like we've just been serving everybody else and getting everybody else stuff. And then we're like, oh my gosh, I'm so hungry. But guess what? Our bodies are in survival mode at that point. They are
Yeah.
panicking and they are looking for food, right? We would never tell our kids, hey, just wait until 4 o'clock to
I
eat.
know. Oh my
That is a
gosh.
recipe for a
Ah!
meltdown,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It is. And as adult bodies, we may be able to handle a little bit more. We may
Mhm.
be able to withstand some of that some of the time. But if we're doing that on a regular basis and we're already living in a high stress environment,
Mhm.
that's just a recipe for disaster. Our bodies are going to melt down. We're not going to be able to be regulated.
Yeah. Yeah. So you have added wellness coach, right? That's
Yes.
so you've added that recently?
In 2023, I
Okay.
I
Yeah.
added that to the things that I was doing. Yeah.
And is that because of this very reason that you saw this, that you experienced this, that it was very apparent that this is a need?
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
I my in 2021, 2022, my health tanked.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
I had gained like 50 pounds. My energy level was nothing. My blood pressure was sky high. Like I was
Mm.
gonna have a heart attack.
Mm-hmm.
And there were all of these physical things that were happening. My mental health had
Mm-hmm.
deteriorated. I had anxiety. I mean, just all sorts of symptoms. But the other thing that I saw was that I was battling this very thing. I knew all the right things to do, but
Yep.
I could not do them.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
could not implement them. I
Yeah.
just couldn't.
Yeah.
And I was forced to have to start working on my physical health just because my body was going to give out.
Mm-hmm.
And when I did, I was so surprised at how my parenting changed
Mm.
and how the environment in my household changed.
Mm-hmm.
Me working on me.
Yeah.
Um, and me being able to stay regulated and calm and patient with my kids. And I was consistent with them on a regular basis because my mood, my, dysregulation wasn't all over the board. Like
Totally.
they
Yeah.
were able to trust that they were going to get the same parent every
Every
single
time.
time.
Mm-hmm.
And that I was going to be able to do the things that I was supposed to be doing for them and co-regulating them and connecting with them and being playful with them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in doing that, their stuff changed. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
their meltdowns lessened. Like the whole environment in our home
Yeah.
changed.
Yeah.
And I just thought, oh my gosh, like people need this.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody needs this. Like
Mm-hmm.
everybody needs to know, why aren't more foster and adoptive parents? Why aren't trainers, when we're learning
Mm-hmm.
to become foster parents or adoptive parents, when we're informing people about trauma-informed practices, why aren't we talking about this more?
Yeah. Yeah. I know it's so important and there's a definite connection there, right?
Yeah.
Um, so with self-care and our own health, what are the first steps? Like, what would you tell someone? Like, how do we do this? How do we step into because we're exhausted, because
Yeah.
we are go, go, go until the last kid finally falls asleep at whatever time, right? And then
Yep.
we get, so how?
Yeah. The first thing is to start small. I mean,
Yeah.
drink water,
Yeah.
right? Carry a water bottle around with you all day. Got mine?
Good old Stanley.
That's right. That's right. Um, but start there.
Yeah.
Um, Start with meal planning. We're already fixing meals for our family anyway,
Hmm.
right? On Sundays or Mondays, I throw a bunch of chicken in the crock pot and I just have shredded chicken on hand,
Hmm.
right? That I can throw into a wrap, I can throw into a salad that, is easy to grab, but I've planned ahead and kind of put that away so that I have nutritious food to
For
eat
yourself.
for myself. Yeah.
Yeah,
Not, I mean, not for my kids. My kids eat it too,
totally. But the
but
purpose is,
but
yeah.
the purpose is for me. Like
Yeah.
those things are planned for me. Like I
Hmm.
kind of think through what I'm going to eat for the week. And then like prepare it. So like I'll cut up veggies or, make sure I have fruit on hand or whatever.
Hmm.
Make sure that I have some easy stuff because sometimes we don't have time.
Yeah.
We don't have time to even think about it, let alone prepare something. So
Hmm.
if I can set aside, an hour or two one day a week to kind of think through that and prepare a couple of things so that things are easy to grab,
Yeah.
then that makes it easy. The other thing that I started doing every single day was walking.
Okay.
And it does take time, but it's something you can even do with your kids, right?
Totally. Yeah.
But that is probably the one thing that is my non-negotiable now.
Hmm.
Like it made the biggest difference in my mental health and my energy. And when
Hmm.
I started doing it, most of the time I try to do it apart from my kids because it's like my quiet space
Totally.
if
Yeah.
I can. Um, but if I do it, I actually add hours to my day because my energy is up, I feel better, and so I'm more productive.
Hmm.
So I'm going to get more done if I take an hour to walk, 30 minutes to walk,
Hmm.
than I will if I don't get that.
Yeah.
Don't get
And
that in every day.
walking outside, walking on a treadmill, does it matter?
Doesn't matter, but preferably outside. I do think
Yeah.
if you can get out in the sunshine, it just does something different
Yeah. Yeah.
for you.
I do you listen to the Mel Robbins podcast at all?
Sometimes, yeah.
Okay. So I listened to I don't even know. It was in some episode from this month because I'm way behind. So sometime in January.
Yeah.
I have like so many in my listen to. But anyway, she was talking about how sometimes we think, oh, well, it's cloudy, so I'm not going to get vitamin D anyway. But actually, that's not true. That even if it's
Yeah.
cloudy or a gloomy day, we still can get vitamin D through the clouds. And so, yeah, walking outside is, if we can, better
Yes.
than a treadmill. But a treadmill is better than nothing.
It's better than nothing,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
but walking on the treadmill is so boring. Like
Same.
it
Yeah.
really
No.
is really hard to
Yeah.
make myself do it. Like I don't know why walking outside is a
It's
totally
just
different
different.
experience, but it is
Yeah. Yeah.
totally different experience. So I love it. And just adding those little things in make a huge difference. And I'll tell
Hmm.
you, it's actually better that you just do little things than
Hmm.
you don't. Foster and adoptive parents don't want to jump into strict diets and
Hmm.
really intense, like hour and a half long workouts
Hmm.
because it's going to overstress your body. The whole name of the game is going to be supporting your body through stress, not adding to the stress.
That's
And
good.
so Exercise is a stress. Um,
Hmm.
Diets are a stress. We want to look at fueling our bodies, making sure we're eating enough,
Yeah.
not trying to restrict what we're eating, because if you're restricting it, then your body, one, is going to hold on to the fat that it has. Um,
Yeah.
but also you're causing your body to go into stress mode,
Hmm.
and we're already there.
Yeah, that's not what we're trying to do here.
What we're trying to
It's
do here.
going to backfire. Um, so what are some signs for, foster adoptive parents or any parent actually, because
Yeah.
there's parents who don't foster and adopt that have hard kids. What are some signs that we should be looking for to be like, oh, I actually might not be well right now?
Yeah. I think moodiness and irritability is
Mm,
always a huge sign for me. And the way that it comes up for me, and it may come up differently for other people, but for me, sensory stuff.
mm-hmm,
So noises are really irritating to
mm-hmm.
me.
Okay. Yeah.
And feel amplified.
Yeah.
Um,
Like they're 10 times louder. Yeah.
when my nervous system is not where it's supposed to be,
Hmm.
like, then those things pick up a little bit. I can
Hmm.
notice that a little bit. The other is like fatigue, if you're tired all the time. And listen, I mean,
Yeah.
we do a
We're gonna
lot.
be tired.
There are
Yep.
times that you're going to be tired, but if you are supporting your body well, you shouldn't be tired every day.
Hmm.
You really shouldn't. There is a way to support your body enough so that you may be worn out at the end of the day, but you're not dying all day
Yeah.
long.
Yeah.
And then the one I think that really is the most important is if you are struggling to connect and stay regulated with your kids.
Yeah.
If you know the things to do and you really do desire to implement them, but there's just something
You
there
just
that
can't. Hmm.
is in between that, that is a sign that something needs to change,
Hmm.
that you're not moving in the right direction.
Yeah, and I sadly hear that too often as a parent coach of like, I just don't want to. I don't want to play with
Yeah,
my kid. I don't
yeah,
want to,
yeah,
sometimes even see my kid, right?
yeah,
So that, yeah, that is a good signal to, kind of like the stoplight signal. Hey girl,
yeah.
there's something going on here.
Something wrong here. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times we try to put in more tools for parents to just do it anyway,
Yeah.
right? Just push through. But if they continue to push through while they're not supporting their bodies, then it's not going to be good connection,
Yeah.
even if they're in it. And
Yeah.
kids can sense
Hmm.
when parents are not in it.
Hmm. Oh, for
Um,
sure. For sure. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
we need to teach parents, because I do think that the majority of foster and adopted parents get into this because they have a heart
Hmm.
for kids. They desire to be with their kids. They desire to help their kids, right?
Hmm.
And so when that no longer is the case, then there's a sign that something needs to be fixed. And listen, we know as foster and adopted parents, if you are trauma informed, you know those things about your kids. You
Hmm.
know that if your kids are dysregulated, you know if your kids are not getting sleep, if they're not eating, if they're not drinking enough water, they're not staying hydrated, they're not getting enough movement. If they're not doing those things, they're not going to connect well with you. They're going to be prone to meltdown.
Yeah.
So we just have to flip that script a little
Yeah.
bit and
Yeah.
understand that those same things apply to us.
Yeah, for sure. Oh my gosh, yeah. That's so hard though to do, but
It is hard.
so
It is hard.
important. Yeah.
Well, and when you're in that space where you're experiencing blocked care, where your nervous system is kind of all over the place,
Mm-hmm.
you have trouble thinking through
Mm-hmm.
how to implement. You have trouble, when we're in that survival mode of our brain, the higher levels of thinking kind of shut down.
Yep.
And so even if you want to do that, it's hard to think about how to implement. It's hard to think about, you know, to get the motivation to get up and do things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Which is where a lot of my clients are when they come to me. They come to me because they need somebody else to do that part for them.
Yeah.
Because they're not able to do that for themselves.
Yep. Yep.
Even though it's just basic things, eating
Hmm.
right and walking and drinking water and sleep,
Yeah.
right? Like
They need co-regulation.
they need co-regulation. They need
Yeah,
somebody to hold their hand and say, it's all right, we're going to get through this together.
totally. Yeah. Well, so kind of on that note, then, how can people find you? And do you work virtually? Like, can anyone work with you? How does that
Yes.
look?
Yes, absolutely. I do everything virtually. And so how it works is I take parents through like an education challenge
Okay.
where I really educate them on how to support their bodies, and we implement a little, like a few habits at a
At a
time.
time. Okay.
That way we're not overwhelming our system. We're not over stressing our system.
Hmm.
And we're also not trying to change our whole life in one day.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're just adding little things in over time. So I take my clients like on this 6 week educational challenge that we do, where we learn all of these strategies. And then sometimes my clients are able to implement at that
Hmm.
point, they're able to implement it on their own. And so they do it on their own. I have other clients that want
Yeah.
continued coaching. And so
Sure.
they will continue with me, to continue to have that encouragement and accountability and stuff. And just in my VIP group, which is my monthly group after you've gone through the 6 week course, my VIP group really works on like some of them do harder strategies, things that are going to put a
Hmm.
little more stress on their body because their bodies have grown accustomed to the
Hmm.
basics at that point.
Totally. So where can people find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at Foster Wellness Coach.
Okay.
I also have a podcast called Foster Parent Well that gives a lot of these strategies and stuff as well.
That's so cool. I'm gonna link all of this in the show notes because I don't know how I missed that you have a podcast. I didn't know that.
I have
I
a
must have
podcast.
missed that part. I'm so excited. I can't wait to go subscribe to your podcast.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so I'll put all of that so people can find you, and even if it's just listening to your podcast, there. And I think that's the cool part, and that's part of why I started a podcast is because like not everybody can pay for the
Sure.
coaching, right?
Yes.
But podcasts are free, so you can listen to a podcast and get little glimpses of or little nuggets, I guess, of whatever you might need for that moment. So I love that. That's cool. Okay.
Yeah, and
Um,
all of my stuff on my podcast is focused on the parent
okay.
because there are lots of things that are focused on our kids.
Yeah.
And I really wanted parents to focus on themselves, not selfishly, not like fruitlessly, but because when we
Yeah.
focus on ourselves, then we can pour out better to our
Yeah.
kids.
All the things that we've just been talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay, well, I have two final questions that I always ask before we wrap up. So the first one is, what do you wish more people thought about when it comes to trauma?
I wish that people thought about trauma in adults
Hmm.
like they do with
With
trauma
kids. Hmm.
in kids.
Yeah.
Um, that I think the idea is that parents are going to step in and
Hmm.
be able to shoulder all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's just going to be fine because they're adults and they can handle it. But the reality is that our bodies weren't really meant for that either. And so we
Yeah.
have to learn how to support it.
Well, and also like a lot of us, we've gotten into foster care or adoption or in the periphery in some capacity because we have experienced stuff in our childhood that we
Yes.
want to like kind of
Yeah.
like give back, right? And so there's that piece too of like our body
Yeah.
keeps the score. It
Yes.
remembers the
Yes.
stuff.
That
So,
stuff pops up and it keeps
mhm.
coming up and it keeps coming up. And
Yeah.
when you think you've processed through it, something else comes up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Surprise.
yeah.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so then what about resources? What would three resources be that, or what would you, oh my gosh, let me try that again. What would three resources, oh my gosh, I'm going to totally edit this out. Three resources you would recommend. There we go. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think so. I'm going to count this as one. But the connected child and the connected parent,
Yes.
I think, are both great
So good.
resources. The connected child is really good for foundational stuff,
Hmm.
but I love the connected parent because
Hmm.
I think that it gives such practical tools
Hmm.
um, for parents to implement.
Yeah. And
Um,
I love the parallel too, like how you hear from Dr. Purvis and then you hear from Lisa
yep.
of like real life. This is how we did what Dr. Purvis just said you should do, right? Like that
Yes.
parallel is so good. Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
I think that's great.
Okay.
I also really like the Hope for the Journey.
Hmm.
If you can be a part of that conference, they host different churches, different groups host that conference where you can
Yeah.
watch it online or, via satellite or whatever.
And that's the former Empowered to Connect, right?
Empowered to Connect. Yep.
Okay. So that's the same thing essentially.
Yes.
And also, Hope for the Journey, you do not have to be a believer to go to that conference.
You do
It
not.
just happens to be hosted in churches, but anybody can go.
Correct.
Love it.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And I don't know that, I'm trying to think, I don't know that all the presenters are
No,
believers. I mean,
no, I don't think they are.
they're just, yeah,
Yeah,
TBRI professionals.
totally. Yeah.
And so I think that's a great resource. That's one of the first ways beyond reading The Connected Child. That's one of the first ways that I really started to
Hmm.
grasp TBRI in a different way. I think that's great.
Yeah.
And I will also say my third resource is going to be a little different
Okay.
than my others because it's not really trauma focused, but a pair of dumbbells.
Oh, tell me more.
Well, I mean, I think as we build muscle, right? Muscle takes energy
Yeah.
to uphold. And so it helps speed up our metabolism. It helps balance our hormones and the cortisol that we're
Mm.
experiencing, right? It's an outlet for stress to be able to lift heavy things.
Hmm.
Um, and it's funny, we know that for our kids. Like we know that
You're
pushing
right.
heavy things, pulling heavy things, right? Like
Oh,
helps them
yeah.
regulate.
Why don't we do that?
I don't know.
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna go lift some weights. I'll be right back.
I know. Seriously. But it does, but it really helps. And so I think everybody needs, and it does, you don't have to have all the different
Yeah,
weights or whatever. I mean, I say if you've got a pair of 10-pound or, 20-pound dumbbells or whatever, you
great.
go.
Yeah, cool. I love that one. That is like something I haven't heard yet. So, and I have 3-pound dumbbells upstairs in my living room that my son was playing with. And I'm like, maybe I need to play with those.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, 3 pounds better than nothing, right? That's awesome. Okay, cool. Well, I will link all of your resources and then how to find you and your podcast and all of that, everything we've talked about. So our listeners can, if they didn't have a chance to write things down, they can find it all. So I really
Awesome.
appreciate your time. And this was so fun. I
Yeah.
loved meeting you and having this conversation.
Yeah, this is great. Thanks, Melissa.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for being on. Have a great day.